And so we not only became accidentally nomadic, then we were just like, great, now what do we do? Because it had been a long-term dream of ours to live abroad. And so that was pretty shattering that the only way that we knew to live abroad fell apart. We just really believed with a family of 7 that the only way that we were going to be able to live abroad was a transfer, like a corporate transfer. Welcome to my kitchen in Portugal. 4 years ago, we signed a lease on this townhouse by the sea in Portugal, paid our deposit, and had no guarantee that we were going to get to live here. Because the way that it works with Portugal is when you are trying to get your visa, you have to have a place to live before they approve your visa. So you better hope that you get approved because you've already paid for a place at that point. So we were paying for this place starting 4 years ago. We got to start living here because you have to apply from the States. It's 3 months after that. So July 2022 is when we got to actually live in this house. I wanted to talk today though about 3 years before that, when we became accidentally nomadic. And then later that year, left America. Like left America to not live there anymore. So we thought, May 2019, the very beginning of the month, we were notified by our landlords that they were selling our house that we were living in. And the reason they decided to sell is because they knew that later that summer we were planning on moving to Ireland with my husband's company. At that time, we were already going to be in transition really soon. They just decided to pull the rug out from us a little bit early, and we became accidentally nomadic. So at that point, we didn't have all the things in place to move to Ireland yet. Like the details hadn't really worked themselves out, but it's what we were planning on, and we thought it was going to happen. Spoiler alert, we did not move to Ireland. But at that point, we thought we were going to. And so we were like, oh, no problem. We're going to be leaving later this summer anyway. We will just pack up our belongings. We will get rid of a lot of stuff. We'll store our other things. And we will live in Airbnbs for the summer while we wait for the transfer to go through. Long story short, we didn't get a transfer to Ireland. So then we were living in Airbnbs in Minnesota, where we used to live. And we didn't have a home because we thought that we were leaving the country. And so that was really overwhelming and sad and really dashing because we had finally gotten brave enough to pursue this live abroad dream. It had been a dream of mine for 20 years at that point. And so when it fell apart, it was heartbreaking. It was also confusing because we're like, well, what do we do now? We don't have a home. We told everybody we're leaving. We're planning on going. I think we had sold my husband's car already. We had packed up all our stuff. We were ready. So we didn't know what to do. And because it had been such a long-term dream, and because, while Ireland would have been great, it wasn't our goal really to live in Ireland. Our goal was to live abroad. And so we were able at that point to start considering options that we hadn't really considered before. And so we just started pondering, okay, well, if we can't live in Ireland, but we want to live abroad, what else could we do? And we were seriously considering the Republic of Georgia. That was a pipe dream of mine. after I had visited there. And the reason it was a pipe dream of mine is because I loved the country, I loved the culture, and also it was a place that you didn't have to get approved for a visa to go there. You, as an American with an American passport, you could go to Georgia and stay for an entire year without having any sort of visa. And so it was a place that I thought would be good long term. At that point, they weren't even really strict after a year. They've gotten a bit more strict since then. But you could go and you could literally just like leave for a day and come back in for another year. So it was a very free, open kind of living situation that didn't require big, complicated visa applications. So I wanted to live there, but my husband wasn't convinced yet. Part of the reason also that I wanted to live there is because if you made US dollars, like worked remotely and made US dollars in Georgia, you could have a pretty nice lifestyle, and also it just, if you wanted to have just a moderate lifestyle, it didn't cost nearly as much as it did in the US. That's called geoarbitrage, if you are curious. I really had my heart set on Georgia, I guess, as a backup plan, but because we weren't in alignment, I just kept looking at other options. And at some point during that summer, while we were like hopping around Airbnbs, total inconsistency for a family of 7. I mean, it was wild. We applied to do a pet sit in Nova Scotia. So I don't know if you know where Nova Scotia is. It's far eastern Canada. Specifically, the island that we were applying for this pet sit on was, I think it's one of the farthest islands in Canada east. So I didn't even know that there was an Atlantic time zone, but 1 hour different than the East Coast is the Atlantic time zone. It's 1 hour more, like 1 hour closer to Europe. Anyway, so we applied for this house sit that was going to be the winter. It was going to be a 5-month house sit in Nova Scotia from November through April. So I think is that bad math? Miraculously, someone who owned a home and had a Shar Pei dog and was going to be gone for the whole winter touring and doing musician stuff with her family, decided that having a family of 7 come stay in her house would be just what her dog Winston needed. I'm going to throw these carrots in. And it turns out that Winston really liked people and children. And so she was like, this will be Winston's dream come true. And so they said, yeah, sure, come stay in our house for 5 months. And for us, we were coming from Minnesota, so like a Nova Scotia lashing cold winter and wet winter didn't really faze us because it was near the ocean, it was in a different culture. Cape Breton is the name of the island, and it has a really strongly Gaelic influence. So it's a very interesting place culturally, like historically and with music and things like that. And so it's a gorgeous little island. And that's how we started our life abroad, is by doing this house sit, getting to stay for 5 months for free. Well, we were supposed to stay for 5 months, but the rest of the story is coming. And that was a really nice buffer into our international life because I was working at the time as a virtual assistant. I started that career completely so that we could move abroad and so that my husband could do his work and then I could do my work remotely just to help with income. And that was because we thought we were moving to Ireland and it was pretty expensive. We assumed we'd be living in the Dublin area. Anyway, when we went to Nova Scotia, it was pre-COVID. So working remotely, and especially working remotely internationally, was not something that companies were really familiar with. And so my husband's company, not only did they not come through with the transfer that we thought was happening, then also he couldn't work anymore if we were in Nova Scotia. And I understand there's laws and et cetera, et cetera. Now I understand all that. At the time, I didn't really grasp it. Like, I didn't grasp all the legal realities, because we weren't going to have to be paying for housing or utilities. And because I was working, my husband was like, okay, well, yeah, let's have me take a sabbatical. And then during this time, he would be doing the primary parenting stuff. He would be managing online school for the kids and cooking. He took up bread baking during that time. He took up spoon carving during that time. It was really a really good time. I think I recommend a sabbatical for anyone who has worked in American corporate for a long time, just because it is such a high stress environment sometimes. And it was honestly the best thing for him that he took a break. I wanted to tell you this story to just illustrate the fact that when you move abroad, you think you have this plan. Like, we were like, corporate transfer, Ireland. This is our plan. We're going to move there and live there and settle there, and then we'll have a life in Ireland. We thought that was the path. And I want to tell you that living internationally just doesn't usually turn out the way that you expect. For example, I'm in Portugal. How did I get to Portugal? The wild, winding paths that you take when you move abroad, and the pivots that you have to make, and the things that don't work out the way you planned, they are plentiful. Is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. Was it destabilizing and hard and stressful? Yeah, it was. But not the whole time, right? There are moments of like, oh, crud, what are we gonna do here? And then there are moments of just absolute bliss, because you're like, I feel safe, and things are slower paced, and my children can be children and not worried about like shooter drills at school, and we can see all these new amazing places, and we can take a cheap flight up to London for the weekend, or, there's so many benefits to this international life. And I'm so glad that we did it. Accidentally nomadic is just the perfect word for just how it all began, a little bit how it's been since. There have been a lot of transitions for us. And after that time with the house sit, then of course it was 2020, and the whole world came grinding to a halt. At that point, we had decided that we were moving to the Republic of Georgia, and we were preparing to do that after the full 5 months, taking care of Winston. And once everybody started talking, oh my gosh, there's this thing, and everyone's getting sick, and like the world is closing, just shutting its doors. And then the musicians who we were staying in their house, they needed to come home. And we were also like, yeah, things are shutting down, countries are closing borders. We better just go ahead and get over to Georgia like sooner than later. So they were like, totally understand. Yeah, let's do it. Everybody's, all these moving pieces. We had our tickets to go to Georgia on March 19th, which was the day that Georgian airspace shut down. And so there we were with our whole plans. This is the second time, right? Because the Ireland plan crashed down, and then the plans to go to Georgia totally came crashing down. We didn't know what to do again. We didn't have a home. We had sold our car because we were leaving not only our country, but the continent. here we are, a family of 7. We have no car, we have no home, and it's COVID. So like, where are we supposed to shelter at home? And the country that we were going to has closed its borders and we can't go there. So we ended up living in campers, different campers, because none of them were big enough for a whole family, campers in my parents' yard in rural Florida. Now, I have a multiracial family. My parents are amazing people. I agree with them philosophically, but they live in a place where there's a lot of people I do not agree with philosophically. And right across the street from their house, there was like a Confederate flag hanging in the window. And then there were like signs down the road that said like F Biden, because of course it was 2020. So it was an election season. It was just not where I wanted my multiracial family to live. And on top of it, we lost all of our work except one of my clients. It was a $500 a month client. So here we are. My husband was on a sabbatical. My clients started dropping like flies. It was really the worst time, the very, very worst time, I think, of this whole entire move abroad experience, because we had tasted how lovely it was to live outside the US when we were in Nova Scotia, and immediately, 4 months later, it came crashing down because of COVID, and it was just devastating. It was so heartbreaking because we knew we loved it. We knew we wanted more of it. We had plans, and at that point, we really had the choice again, like, we don't have a home, my husband doesn't have a job, I barely have any work. What should we do? We considered moving back somewhere and signing a lease for a year, but like, we didn't want to give up. We didn't want to give up this dream. And it was a really hard decision because it's really scary to be without work mostly, and to have 5 kids to provide for, and to not have a home. That's terrifying. Oh, it was so scary. But I don't even know, like, I don't remember the conversations. I wish I had recorded more of it, but I was just like, I did a lot of ugly crying during that time. It was so discouraging. But somehow we decided, okay, well, my husband was able to get a contract position. So he was able to start working again. So we started getting an income again. And then I built back up my clients so we weren't like poverty stricken. And we decided we would go to my parents' cabin in Wisconsin, which is not a nice cabin. Sorry, Dad. It's a very small, simple cabin that had some mold problems. But it was not campers in a yard, so we lived there for several months while we tried to make our new plan. And our new plan involved the UK, because the UK was one of the few places that you were allowed to go as Americans, because Americans were not being very safe about COVID. So we packed up our life again and we moved to the UK. Not moved there, but we went for a long stay.